Hi, and welcome to the first Cypress Germany meetup in 2022. So I'm really happy that you're all here tonight or during the night, because we just figured out that we have a lot of people across different countries and different time zones. And that is really, really cool. Thank you so much for this. I think I even know one person where he wrote that it's like 2:30 a.m. right now, which is pretty impressive for coming and joining us. And also shout out to Vitaly Mick. He is like re-streaming this stream to his community on Twitch. So probably he's on YouTube, subscribe to him, pretty amazing guy. So thank you so much for being here. Let's all have a great and fun time so that nobody falls asleep wherever he is or however late it is there. So this talk is about design patterns for sustainable automatic end-to-end tests. So this is like a long name, but it kind of perfectly describes what this is all about. So today I would love to show you a few ways how you can improve the overall quality and sustainability in your testing projects. But before this, let me first introduce myself. My name is Christian Dangl, and I work at the software agency Das ist Web in Munich, in Bavarian, Germany. And we are creating online B2B and B2C shops for our customers based on software. And the fun fact, this is actually the company that Ramona is working for. And besides that, I also run my own company, LiveScore, which is a scoreboard playout graphics software for MLB TV, NHL, with sports like cricket, rugby, baseball all around the world. And I'm also involved in different projects such as SVR Unit, which is a server testing framework, also Docker, which is a Docker project, especially for software, and a couple of other things. And yeah, with that, I have the opportunity to code with all kinds of languages like PHP, C#, Swift, other languages, lots of DevOps stuff, and finally, last but not least, QA, which otherwise, without QA, I'd be probably screwed a couple of times by now. So, oops. When we first introduced testing back then at Das ist Web, we figured out that establishing such a thing really takes a while in your company. So we had our ups and downs, switching different technologies until we ended up using Cypress. And we also had to pause testing because of deadlines. So a really horrible thing. But the problem is, and you all know this, you have many people, many departments in your company. That means you have many goals in your company because everyone has his or her own goal. And our target and goal is to make sure that every goal has the same equal benefit for the company and importance. And the problem is, when it comes to testing, you also probably know that if your tests are red broken or just flaky when the actual application under test would work, then you have a problem because they do not take your test seriously anymore. So today it's all about getting rid of these problems, improving the options to maintain the sustainability, and also to bring a bit more fun when it comes to scripting those tests with Cypress. So that means the actual goals for today. I will show you a project. So we're skipping the installation, just dive right through in a sample project. So the first thing is probably, if you are already familiar with Cypress, then it could be a bit boring, but it's really important for a story to create a basic test, how you would usually do it. And then we improve the whole testing scenario by introducing object-oriented patterns, programming and design patterns, and also afterwards combine these into scenarios. And even though the advanced goodies are not really design patterns, I thought it might be good to at least tell you a bit more about it, because if you are, let's say, a plugin manufacturer, how to handle different versions of your hosting platform, in Shopware in our case today, how to do local remote testing, which is actually the foundation for the last final step, how to run your tests in pipelines and really force everyone to use them. So hands-on. I've prepared a open source GitHub project, so you can just clone it, download it. But I would still recommend maybe just wait for it and watch me now and watch the talk, but you can play around with it later on. 3, 2, 1. Here we go with the basics. So let me go over to my IDE, which is PHP Storm at the moment. So we have a local shopware online shop available. We have Cypress. Cypress is started on the host machine on a MacBook and just run against our local host. And it's all based on Docker, just in case you're wondering. If I now go to Cypress, I've prepared a simple start test. So this is just, this one's just opening the homepage. So how would you usually start with tests? Probably the best thing and compliments to Cypress is the built-in playground. So we just open the playground, and our goal would be to head over to the register page and probably fill in our first name, last name, and create an account. So we would just go to that icon, then copy paste it into our PHP Storm. So I just open that test, click on it, and then we rerun the test. So perfect. Then we just repeat that step until we are finally where we should be. Oops. All right, now let's just fill out the first name. Maybe by doing clear, type. And Christian. As you can see, we have now Christian being filled in. So problem with all this is that this is a pretty boring thing, as you know. So I did prepare a second file, and this is a full checkout test. So the full checkout test does this. It registers a new account, clears the session, logs into that account, adds something to the cart, a product, creates a new checkout, selects a payment method until it places the order, and finally finishes the payment until we can assert that we are on the thank you page and everything is done. So how does the actual source code look like? In the project, if you want to clone it, in 1 basics 2, that is our sample for today. So as you can see, we have a bit more than in our previous step. So the whole registration form is being filled out. We clear the cookies in order to log in again. So if you are now saying, okay, why doesn't he just use Cypress session, maybe creating snapshots, improving the speed of everything, then yeah, I could do it, not tonight. So next thing is we log in, and then we come to adding products to the cart. And as if you take a close look, we navigate to the first category in our online shop, open the first product, then we're on the product detail page, adding 2 items to the cart. And then we head over to the checkout, select paid in advance. We could use PayPal, credit card, whatever, and then just placing the order until we do our final assertion. So we have some problems with that test. First thing is, it is pretty long. So just imagine you have hundreds of these tests, and they are maybe not that different. How would you maintain those? Also, if we come back and scroll a bit more up to the product, would you really understand what is going on in there if I wouldn't add a comment, even with that single product comment? Probably sometimes in that case, it's really hard to tell. And this is where object-oriented programming comes into play. So if you would develop your application on the test, your traditional software, there will probably be things that you're using like design patterns, architecture, or different approaches. So why would you use these? Because they help you to get rid of duplicate code. improve the overall quality, and also make sure that you are more efficient in the way you are working. And I think it would be a waste of knowledge if that couldn't be applied to testing projects too. And this is what we are doing now with our first pattern. The page object pattern. So page object pattern, it's everything about pages. That means we create classes for specific pages. And these classes help us to do things with that page, to access controls, HTML objects, or invoke functions like a login function or anything like that. So let me just show you how it could be done. We just close that test and head over to our second section with the prepared test, the page object test. Just to let you know, every folder contains a solution file, which might not run exactly and completely, but it gives you an idea how to code it. So we are now focusing not on the registration form because that one's just too long, but the login form. So let me scroll down there. And the first thing we're going to do is we add a new class login page. So in Cypress, in the support folder, I did prepare a page object login page. So in that class, we create two functions. The first one could be get email field. The other one, probably get password field, right? So we go back to the test, just copy everything in there. And then only using the login mail from Cypress and return it. We do the same with the password. Just remove the other stuff. Then I somehow need doc blocks to have it visually complete. Otherwise, I think it's still a prototype. So now let's use our page object in here. So let me just go up there and create a new const page login is new login page. So it's already imported. And down there, I just replace those locators and selectors with the login page login, get email field, and page login, get password field. And if I now do Cypress pause and don't let me forget to switch over to the other test, we should still have a working login. Perfect. And we pause on the account page. So you might think, okay, that's easy, but it's a powerful, powerful thing. Now just imagine you have like hundreds of these tests and they're all using the login. And when you have your lovely friend front-end developer who thinks it might be good to switch over to a different class ID of the password field that you probably use, and then you suddenly have like 100 broken tests. With that approach, you have a centralized single source of truth about the locator, how to select the password field, and you can easily repair it, and then all your hundreds of tests are green again. So that's the main aim. And this is a powerful thing if you know how to use it. Let's do a second thing. We come back to PHP Storm, and probably you want to get rid of the whole login itself. So let me just copy this, go to the login page, and then we do a do login. And we're pretty flexible in here. We can just provide the email and password as arguments. Probably use this to avoid duplicate code. And we have the login button and just need to replace, obviously, the values, email, password, oops, yeah, whatever. we go back and just use this. Page login, .do login, provide the correct password too. And suddenly we end up with a nice to have function that we also are able to use in a different way with different credentials, obviously. So this is the page object pattern. The problem is, what if your software, your testing project grows? What if the login page might get more and more functions, more and more elements? Then you might want to go with a different way. But before we come to this, let's talk first about the Cypress commands, because you might be wondering, couldn't we just use Cypress commands too? Yes, you could. The problem is this: with the application under test or traditional software development, do you think those applications rely on a single file with like hundreds of static functions? Because that's just what it is, basically. So design patterns and a good architecture, they make sense if you know how to use them, but they're not required. They just help you. And also, I saw that even Cypress writes about these Cypress commands that there is an option to abuse it for patterns. I'm personally a fan of those sub commands that you can use. You can extend password options with passwords and text fields, but on a root level, I'm personally more doing it the other way around. So I would also want to let you know that the things that I'm going to tell you, or I'm telling you tonight, probably this is for testers who really want to do more with their testing projects, to increase their huge testing projects. So this might not be a perfect fit if you just have a handful of tests that are easy. So just to let you know. So on to our next design pattern. Keyword driven, also known as action. And this is where it gets interesting. This is where more and more architecture comes into play. In fact, we are finally ending with some kind of free-tier layer application, like with a real software. So while the page object pattern focuses on pages, yeah, this one is all about actions. It's about functions. It's about things that you want to execute. So let me show you. We just close this and head over to our third section with the actions. So we have the same original test in here, and now we create a login action. Let me just copy this one and go over to our folder with actions, storefront for the front end. And I do have a login action here. And the way you do it can be different. So you can have a single login action, but when it comes probably to a checkout check, it's more like checkout actions. You probably have multiple actions, and it's up to you to decide whether to create a single file or multiple files. So I don't really care. And the good thing is, if you have a good design pattern or architecture, overall architecture in your project, you can easily refactor it too. So let's just grab those things and just put them in here. Then we can get rid of just these copied functions. And here we go. So let's just use this. We go up there, and I should call it login because it gives me a better feeling because I can focus on what is going on. So login action. And with the login action, I can now do login, and it's all working again. But if you are still watching and not sleeping, you might have recognized that this is exactly the same as we just did before. And that's no mistake, that's on purpose, because there is a difference even though it's the same code. So while the page objects focus on pages, actions are all about what is going on. So you could, in fact, have actions across multiple pages. Our login action might not have to do with anything with a page at all if you're using a request down the hood just to do, let's say, a single sign-on or anything. So this is about actions, and then it makes sense. But what about our HTML elements, password field, text field, and the login button? So shouldn't we improve this too? Yeah, absolutely. So for this, we use object repositories. So as with traditional software, repositories offer you a storage to access a layer and its objects from an underlying layer. So in other words, for our sample project or testing project, our object repository provides us access to only the HTML elements on a separate layer in our testing project. Let me show you. We just go over to the repositories folder. So I've created a single repository folder. Then I'd like to keep the name, in that case, login repository, just helps me, because in the end, we might end up with like 20 files about repositories, and that's a good thing also. So let me just show you how it's done and then the benefits. So we already have the code in here. So that's like get email, which is the same that we just had, get password. And I did also add the get submit button. So now on to our action, not the test, but the action. We do almost the same as we did one layer higher inside the actual test, and just do a repo login is new login, repository. And then we just replace those with get email, repo login, get password, and of course our final repo login get button. So this is how you use it. And it does have a lot of benefits. First thing is you have separation of content. So with every traditional and good made software, you do not just paste it in every single tier, what must not be in there or could not be, should not be in there. Also, you have the option, if you are a team with more testers that create Cypress tests, you could actually outsource the selection, XPath select CSS selectors to someone who's better probably. So when it comes to me, I'm not always the best one. I love the playground and just copy paste it, and if it works, then I just use it. If it breaks one day, then I can repair it or even improve it in a separate tier, separate layer. I do not have to touch this again, because this is, thanks to the abstraction layer, always the same. And I can even ask a friend of mine to help me, because I'm maybe, again, just too dumb to filter out that element from the current page. So this is a keyword-driven aspect with actions that you just chain next to each other. Is like having a puzzle. So let me show you how a final checkout test could look like. It's probably not running in that, because then I would have needed so many more files, or at least a couple of more. So with the actions checkout solution, we do, of course, have more dependencies, more objects on top of it, but that's fine. And in that case, I've decided to have the visit commands on the outer scope, just to get rid of it in the action. So I'm more flexible in there. And then I register an account, maybe with dummy data, except 2 dynamic values that I want to provide in here. That's how I've just modeled my my action. Then I use the session reset session. I can reuse this action, that component, in every test where needed, or probably in a before each, whatever. Okay, it's not session bound, but during a test, Then I do a login. I open the first category, click on the first product, add to cart. I could easily switch over to quantity free if I want to. Open the cart, switch payment method, place order, and assert. So this is so much better to read. If we compare it to the first sample, it's so much better to maintain, but it also requires you to think a bit more about creating the architecture as with a traditional software. So that is the last real design pattern: keyword, actions, and object repositories. So problem is, as always, if you go on with things, it could be that one day you have like multiple actions that are always repeating. And as already mentioned at first, when you create a good architecture, you want to avoid duplicate code and parts of duplicate code. So you can combine actions, chain them next to each other with something that's called scenarios or modules. Actually, there's no real name. Thing is, I didn't really make that up on my own. It's existing in a different testing framework that I use for Windows. So these are things that do exist, on the other hand, that you can just invent for your project. As long as it helps you, it's great. So for me, my scenarios are based on the command pattern. That means I create a scenario like a dummy basket that I always need to proceed with additional checkout tests, whatever. And in the constructor, I can configure what I want, probably the product number or the overall quantity, and I just use any random product number. And then I just execute it. So let me show you how it could look like. We close the existing tabs and just move over to the scenario. And this time, we want to get rid of everything that's kind of a setup routine. So like registering, login, adding something to the cart. And then we want to actually only test or specify what is going on with the current checkout. So in the support folder, I have created a scenarios folder and just call it dummy basket scenario. So we build our cart. And in my case, I just want to configure the quantity of the single item that is being added to there. The rest is, in that case, there's a comment. I would usually use the actions and not the plain Cypress code in here. But problem is I wasn't able to run it because I just developed it while doing the talk. So that then it would just crash when you clone the repository. So that's it. You chain the required actions next to each other and then just use it. So let me just const scenario dummy basket, and let's create a new dummy basket with like free quantity, product with quantity number 3. And then I just replace that duplicate code.
You missed out an equal sign in line 3. You missed out an equal sign.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so a scenario dummy basket, that was a trick I wanted to see if anyone is sleeping. So I've configured it at the top, and now it just executed. So this is just a free option to combine actions and reuse them. Okay, so next part. I told you about some advanced goodies that I just wanted to share with you because it's always a matter of how you do things for you. So we were talking about real design patterns. Now I would love to show you a bit more about patterns, practices that you can use that helps you to really have the final goal in your company, you rely on the test and they are taken seriously. And one thing could be if you are a plugin manufacturer. So I do plugins for Shopware, for instance, you probably have different versions of your host platform, different Shopware versions. So you can either have a separate test case suite, or you can try to implement conditional testing. But first thing, as always, if you are creating mocks, fakes, whatever, keep it simple. If it's not working, it's red anyway, but still keep it simple. So let me show you what for me personally, did come up with. And we'll see the cool thing with the pipelines in the end. Let me just close a few folders, go over to the integration folder, to the advanced section, and there's host versions. So with Shopware, there might be a different XPath selector ID for the salutation when doing the registration. And it's always a trade-off. Please don't get me wrong, it's a trade-off. In that case, I would do condition testing. If a lot is different, I would probably write a separate test for that version or starting from that version. So you really have, and that's a cool thing with architecture, you can refactor it. So how do we even get the version of Shopware? I like to use makefiles because they give me a separate abstraction layer that I can later on use for developers locally, for remote testing, but also in pipelines. So I have the installation clean, just read the README, and it should be all clear. We can open the UI, but also run the whole stuff. So if we face the make run command, that requires not only the URL, which we come on to that later, but the Shopware version. And the Shopware version is based on an environment variable that we just pass on to Cypress. And in my support folder, I've created a helper class that I probably don't find it right there, and that's called Shopware. And in that class, I do have access to the get version from the Cypress env, and also some ways just help us to compare the version. That means this approach in practice allows me, I will show you later, to have a full payment plugin for a Dutch payment provider with over 80 real end-to-end payment checkout tests across like 10 different versions of Shopware that do differ in the way how they are made. Ramona knows what I'm talking about. Okay, so that is about creating test suites for platform hosts if you're doing plugins. Next thing, just a small one, local and remote testing. So as you know, you can use the Cypress base URL for the target of the application and the test. If you go with that way to also provide that as, for instance, in a makefile, like here, you can then just start your test locally or the same on a remote machine. And that's a cool thing, because one of the aims things that we should really aim for is to make testing, execution of testing, easier for everyone, especially for the only developers out there, right? So with that approach, everyone can just test that QA integration, so that local Docker container or that remote Docker container, whatever. So this helps us for our last final step. When we combine these and go over to pipelines. So if you have managed it to get to this point, then you're almost done. All you need to do is to force everyone to use your Cypress tests. And we can do this with pipelines. There are platforms such as GitHub. We have GitHub Actions. We have Bitbucket pipelines. But there are applications such as Buddy that only focus on doing good pipeline stuff. So continuous integration, continuous deployment, sandboxing. So I'm a huge fan of that software. Maybe you want to check it out. But there's plenty of options available to do it. And for the sample, because I've hosted it on GitHub, I want you to see how it would or could work. We are going to take a look at the GitHub pipelines. So I've talked about doing a plugin for a Dutch payment provider. So that one is Molly. And with Molly, why I'm showing and telling you about Molly, because everything that I just told you is inside those open source projects for Shopware 5 and Shopware 6, if you want to dig deeper after this talk. So as you can see on the left side of the image, we have everything that's like chess test, PHP syntax checks, ESLint, StyleLint, unit test, everything you need nowadays, but also Cypress tests. So on the right side of the image, you see that we are doing real checker tests for PayPal, Pay Now, Pay Later, Giro Pay, you name it. And this is only a handful of what is existing, like I said, over 80 in different combinations. And now to the cool part where we combine everything that we just saw with the advanced goodies. We can, or it is, tested in parallel in like 10 different Shopware versions in combinations with different PHP versions. And this is, for me speaking in the role as a plugin manufacturer, this is like a must-have. So in fact, Cypress, with that setup, helped me to avoid huge problems, small problems, being released out there for thousands of merchants that rely on a stable payment provider. So I wouldn't ever want to work without Cypress in that combination again. Let me show you how you can do it. And I've also added it to the sample project. So let's just close a few tabs one more time and go over to the root folder where it says .github. That is just how you create GitHub pipelines, workflows in a YAML file. And it looks like this. So we have the name, continuous integration pipeline. In my case, we have a trigger. That just means when is it being executed. So on every push manually. More interesting is the part when it comes to jobs. So in our previous image, we had like thousands of jobs with unit tests, chest tests. This sample is only about end-to-end tests, obviously. So what we have in here, we use a matrix strategy with a fail fast disabled approach. That just means in the include sections, we can provide every combination that is being executed, and it doesn't stop if one fails. So in the end, real story, I had like 10 different Shopware versions, and in one Shopware version, one Cypress test had a bug. Perfect. So thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Shopware. There was a change, but cool thing, it never went live. So in that case, I do have a combination of a Shopware version, so 6.4.7.0 with PHP 8. I could easily switch to PHP 8.1. I'll show you with the Docker containers in a minute, and also have a second one based on PHP 7.4. So I actually use the results, the reports of the analytics that I do get from Molly to have the most important combinations automatically tested in the open source project whenever someone merges a pull request, which helps me really a lot. So with the steps, we clone obviously the repository, then we start a Docker container on the localhost HTTP port. And I have to say we have a cool thing because we are also creating Dockware, which is a prepared project that comes with a prepared Shopware in any version. If you want to do this, you somehow need to make sure that you have a Docker container with your application up and running. So you could maybe start any PHP container or node container and just upload your source code in there. So you're totally free. In our case, it's a one-liner. So we just wait until started, and now comes the fun part. Using the make files, it's exactly the same thing that I did locally. That also means you know that we can reproduce the exactly same thing locally when we have to repair or fix it. So we just install Cypress, and then we run Cypress. That's the command I just showed you a couple of minutes ago, and provide the current Shopware version from our matrix, as well as the HTTP local host, because that's the domain. So exactly the same as on our local host. And then Cypress runs. And afterwards, always afterwards, no matter if it fails or passes, we just download the shopware logs, the Apache logs, and also the Cypress logs, as well as the Cypress screenshots, and make sure these are zipped into a results folder. So if in my sample from a couple of minutes ago, one shopware version fails, I can just download the zip file and see in the screenshots of Cypress what was probably the problem. Let me just show you and switch over to here and move my browser to this window. And it's gone. Let me open a new browser where I have a different profile. We already see that the CI pipeline is passing. And in the actions, we have our CI pipeline. It's green, which is cool. We have the results. If it's red, might be more important. We can just download it. And we have both shopware versions in different PHP versions tested, and these are the steps. So I have to use this window because here I'm signed in. Otherwise, we wouldn't see the actual results because of security, right? So what is Cypress doing? Cypress just starting, doing the exact same thing as locally. And down there, you should probably be familiar with hopefully a green result screen that all our 6 tests have passed. So this is the final thing where you combine everything in a sustainable and reliable testing project. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really curious to hear your questions now. Otherwise, happy snack time. And of course, thank you for having me.